So it's the beginning of October, and it's time we talk about all of the books that I read in the month of September. Hi, my name is Jonathan, and this is Mr. Pearson Talks Books. I'm an elementary school teacher who reads middle grade books so that I can make recommendations to my students, to their parents, and to other teachers and librarians so that we can help the right child get the right book. Now, in the month of September, I read or listened to 12 different books, and I want to talk about them with you. The first book that I read, and I think I started this at the very end of August and then continued over, was a new book called Dreamslinger by Gracie Kim. And the best way to describe Dreamslinger is kind of like Amari and the Night Brothers meets Pokemon. Because this is the story of a girl named Aria who has I guess the best way to describe it is a genetic mutation that lets her dream sling. So each night she goes to sleep, and when she wakes up in the morning, she has a power that she has to then dispense. And a lot of people see dream slinging as kind of a bad thing because a few years ago, in the past in this story, there was something called the Great Outburst, and a number of dream slingers lost control of their power and ended up killing a lot of people. And so as a result, it's kind of seen like if you think the X-Men and how people are afraid of mutations, very similar here. Well, in this story, Arya is invited to go to a kingdom that's in Korea where she's going to enter a competition to learn to control her dream slinging abilities. And so her dad, who is working with dream slinging, and people in the state that she lives in want her to go undercover to find out if there's anything nefarious taking place. This was a fun book to read. It was a lot of fun. Like I said, it's Amari and the Night Brothers, which is one of my favorite books, mixed with some Pokemon because there are some unique powers and little animals that they can use their powers to in battles and things that they do in the competitions that they're a part of. It was a lot of fun. I think I gave this book 3.5 or 4 out of 5 stars. Highly recommend this, especially if you have a student or a child who loves fantasy. Next up that I read was the Bellwoods Game by Celia Crampian. And this is a middle grade spooky book about a town called Fall Hollow. And every year, the sixth graders, I think it's the sixth graders, it's either the sixth or the fifth grader. Yeah, it's the sixth graders. They have to play a game called the Bellwoods Game. And the idea is three of them are chosen to go into the woods and they have to ring a bell. The only catch is there is a ghost that is going to try to catch them and keep them from ringing that bell. If they are caught, they have to give her something, but they don't really remember what happened in the woods. However, if they ring the bell, then the ghost stays away from their town until the next year. This book was surprisingly scary. I was talking with a friend of mine who had also read it, and it reminded us a lot of Stephen King's It. It starts off as this kind of haunted, being chased by a ghost type story, and then it changes. And when it changes, it gets really dark and really scary. I gave this book a 4 out of 5. It was like I said, remarkably scary, but also a lot of fun to read. And if you have a fourth or fifth grader, maybe even a sixth grader who likes scary stuff, this is going to be the perfect Halloween book for them. I also read, and this was a book that I found at Barnes and Noble and picked up just for the cover, and that's The 13 Doors of Black House by Laura Lavoie. And in this story, this is the girl named Maya. She's having some friend issues because of some things that are taking place on the school newspaper. Well, she convinces her family to take summer vacation to the house of her favorite author, the mystery writer Augusta Black. Sorry, Augusta Black. And when she gets there, they find out things are not exactly how they had hoped. There's no cell service. Lots of weird things are taking place, and they're told under no circumstances can they go in Augusta Black's writing room or open any of the doors. Well, as you can probably figure out, some of those doors get open and things go off from there. And Maya and her cousins have to figure out, how are we going to get these doors closed? How are we going to stop this? And what's the best way to keep the ghost from haunting the house? This book was so much fun. It was a blast to read. Absolutely loved it. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. Really, really enjoyed it, and I hope that more people will find a way to pick this up and read it, because it was a great spooky book, a great mystery book, lots of atmosphere. This would be a great book to read on a dark and stormy night, which we'll get to in just a little bit. But yes, The 13 Doors of Black House by Laura Lavoie. Excellent book. Next up, and these are in no particular order. These aren't necessarily in the order that I read them, but they're in a stack here. And this one is Give Me Something Good to Eat by D.W. Gillespie. And this one came to me as a recommendation from my BookTube friend, Sean Stevenson. I will leave a link to his channel in the description, but please check out him, check out his channel so you can get more recommendations. But in this particular story, this is, let me get the guy's name, Mason. Mason lives in a town called Pearl in North Carolina, and Pearl is absolutely obsessed with Halloween. I mean, they go all in, all out. It's crazy. But there's a dark side to this, because every Halloween, some child goes missing. And the darker part of that is the fact that nobody even remembers that that child existed except for Mason. And that's because when Mason was much younger, his best friend disappeared and nobody even remembered that he existed. The only reason he could remember is because he had his name written down on a book that they had written together. And then the Halloween that this story takes place, Mason's sister Meg is the one that's taken. And so Mason has to figure out what's going on and how to get Meg back. And it turns out that there is a kind of, if you think like Stranger Things, how there is the upside down. Well, there is an upside down version of his town, which is run by a witch and basically possessed by monsters. Everybody that lives there is a monster. And so Mason and his best friend Serge and two of their friends from school go into Under Pearl, as it's called, to try to rescue Meg. This book had some serious like Halloween scariness going on. There were monsters. There were some situations that I wasn't sure how they were going to be resolved. It was that creepy. But if you're like me and you're a child of the 80s and 90s, if you remember the movie Monster Squad, or even the movie Little Monsters starring Fred Savage, this definitely had that feeling to it. I would give this, again, 4 out of 5 stars, maybe even 4.5. It is that good. It is so much fun to read. And then most recently, I think I finished this one just before the end of the month. This is a book called Scary Stories for Young Foxes by Christian McKay Heidecker. And this is the story of 7 wolf cubs, or wolf kits, who want to hear a scary story. And so they go to the storyteller, and she begins to tell them stories. And one by one, the fox kits get scared off or bored or something, and they leave, and they can't stay until the end. But as this story is being told, the storyteller is telling them 2 stories. One about a fox named Yuli, who was born with a deformed or disabled leg, and another one, let me see if I can find her name here. I believe it's Mia. And Mia is with her brothers and sisters with their teacher one day when things go wrong and Mia has to flee. And it's all about how the 2 of them are trying to survive and eventually how they come to be together. And I'm going to tell you, this book has one of the creepiest villains that you would never have expected. I'm not going to tell you who it is. It is wild how they took this person and made her into a villain. But this was one that I read, and it won the Newbery Honor Award for children's literature. Great book. Again, another 4 out of 5 stars. I want to give this book. So those are the ones that I have physical copies for. Now, some of the other books that I read a new one called The Sherlock Society Hurricane Heist by James Ponti. It is the sequel to the book The Sherlock Society, which is about a group of kids, a brother and sister, and their two best friends and their grandfather who solve mysteries. Now, this particular one ties back to the grandfather's childhood when he was taking some deliveries to a hotel just before a hurricane came in. So it plays back into the flashbacks, and he finds out that a guy that he knew from the hotel when he was a kid was accused of stealing a lot of money and some paintings and things from the hotel on the night of the hurricane. Well, fast forward to present day, and a hurricane comes through and reveals they find a body, and it come to find out it is the body of the man that was accused of the robbery. And so the Sherlock Society, as they call themselves, the four children and their grandfather, using the tools of journalism to help them investigate, they start to investigate this old cold case to see if there's a way that they can prove that the grandfather's friend was actually innocent and who was responsible for the theft. This was a brand new book. It just came out. And because it's James Ponti, 5 out of 5. James Ponti's books always hit for me. They are always 5 out of 5. Absolutely love them. And speaking of James Ponti, another book that I read this month was City Spies Mission Manhattan. This was book 5 of the City Spies, and it just continues the story of Paris and Rio and Sydney and Brooklyn, and they bring in a mother who is their leader. They bring in his son, and it's all about the adventure that they have, eventually traveling to Manhattan in order to protect a young climate activist. Again, 5 out of 5. Absolutely love it. His books, they always have such a sweetness and a lot of heart, and the kids are awesome. And the one thing that I really like about James Ponti's books is the adults are never idiots. Sometimes when you have books that are written for middle grade and there are adults, the adults are portrayed as being stupid or incompetent or something. James Ponti never does that. He never talks down to the kid characters, to the children characters, but he also never makes the adults come across as incompetent. And I absolutely love that about James Ponti. So that was City Spies Mission Manhattan. That's book 5. I have one more to go, and I will finish the series. Mr. Ponti, if there's any chance that you see this, please keep the stories coming. Your books are wonderful, and I don't want to be without any more of them to read. Then I also read another Goosebumps, and this was Monster Blood 2. I got to be honest, I really did not like Monster Blood, the first one. It was not my cup of tea. I thought it was stupid. That's not fair. Not that it was stupid. It just wasn't for me. It wasn't one that I liked. Monster Blood 2, however, really liked it. I really enjoyed that book. It kind of picks up where the first one ended off. The boy goes back to school, and then his friend, when he was staying at his great aunt's house, comes, and there's more Monster Blood. He's being bullied by a kid, and there's a hamster. Monster Blood gets involved. I will say the ending, little hokey, but overall, love this book. It was a lot of fun. And then I also listened to a book called In Myrtle Peril by Elizabeth C. Bunce, and this is continuing the Myrtle Hardcastle mysteries. Really like these books because they are, I think the term that people use is cozy. It's about a small girl who's very precocious. She's a little smarter than she needs to be, and her governess, who live in England, her father's a solicitor, which basically means a prosecuting attorney. And in this particular one, her father has to prove the authenticity of a claim to a fortune made by this girl. And at the same time, he has to go to the hospital to have his tonsils taken out. And so at this time, when this story takes place, tonsillectomy was a pretty major surgery. And while he's there, he witnesses a murder. And so he's trying to They're trying to prove the authenticity of this girl's claim on this fortune while trying to also solve this murder, and they intersect at some point. Myrtle Hardcastle books, the stories surprisingly violent, but also really fun to read. Um, I think that any child who reads these or listens to them as I do, they're going to grow up to love Agatha Christie novels. They remind me so much of the books by Agatha Christie that I've read, and the way that the characters tie together, and there's always a great big cast of characters who are fun to be a part of. Really like Myrtle Hardcastle. I also listened to Tilly and the Map of Stories by Anna James. This is continuing the Pages and Co. series, and that is about a girl who has the ability to book wander, which means she can go into the stories and interact with the characters. And this is the third one that I've been a part of or listened to. And in this particular case, there's two people who want to take over what's called book magic. And so they find themselves controlling the libraries. And Tilly thinks she has to find a group of people called the archivist or the archivist in order to stop them from doing what they're doing. It's a lot of fun. It was a good book, especially for those who love books about books. I think what I like about this most is two of the characters that show up all the time are Anne from Anne of Green Gables and Alice from Alice in Wonderland. Tilly herself, she is part real, part fictional because her mother fell in love with a book character and ended up having Tilly, and so she has one foot in the book world and one foot in the real world. It was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to seeing how the story continues. The last book I read was A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. If you have been following this channel, you know that my absolute favorite book of all time is called When You Reach Me by Rebecca Stead. And When You Reach Me is an homage, or it was written in honor of A Wrinkle in Time. And I figured since that's my favorite book, I should go back and reread A Wrinkle in Time because I read it when I was a kid. And come to find out, I did not remember a whole lot of this story. But the story is Meg and her brother Charles Wallace and Calvin, they need to go find Meg's father who's been missing. He was involved in a scientific experiment, and he went and he got captured. He's trapped on a planet, a distant planet called Camazotz. And so they go to rescue him. And then after that happens, Charles Wallace gets taken. And I got to tell you, this particular book, it is a beloved classic. It's purported to be a science fiction book, but there's a lot of scary stuff in there. Particularly, you get to one scene and there's a disembodied brain that's just like laying on a table, and the interactions they have with that. Some scary stuff there. So that book, I'm going to give it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I know it's a classic. There were some things that didn't necessarily like, but overall, I mean, it was a lot of fun, and I can understand why Miss Rebecca Stead wrote her book in honor of that. And then there's another book, the First State of Being, which came out earlier this year and won the Newbery Award, is an homage to, or written in honor of, When You Reach Me. Kind of completes that trilogy. All 3 books are great. Oh, you know what? I forgot one book. And that was because I don't just read middle grade books, I also read an adult book. That was The Shadow of the Sith by Adam Christopher. And this is a Star Wars book, as you can tell from the title, about Lando Calrissian and Luke Skywalker. And it also has Rey. If you've seen the Star Wars sequels, the Force Awakens and The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, the main character in it is Rey. This has her as a child, and it explains who her parents were and how she came to be on the planet of Jakku, which you see when the first movie, The Force Awakens, begins. This is kind of a filler story. It's all about how Rey and her parents are trying to escape from a bounty hunter who is chasing them. He's been hired to capture the girl. And Lando and Luke are trying to prevent that from happening. It's good if you want to fill in the gaps as to who Rey was and where she came from. But I found myself as I was reading it, it was one of those books that I enjoyed reading it while I was reading it. but I didn't really have any desire once I put it down to pick it back up again. It was a good book. Adam Christopher was a great writer, but it just didn't really have that draw to me, I guess, because I knew what was going to happen. I knew that Lando and Luke weren't in any mortal peril because they were around later on. But yeah, that's the Shadow of the Sith by Adam Christopher. I'd give it probably 3 out of 5 stars. I mean, it was enjoyable. I love Star Wars books, so I'm gonna enjoy pretty much every one I read. But it just didn't really pull me in the way that some of the other books did. Those are the 12 books that I read this month. I'd like to know what you read. So if you have read any of those, please tell me what you thought down in the comments. Or if you have a book that you think I should read or add to my reading list, go ahead and put that down in the comments as well. And make sure to like and subscribe so you can continue to be a part of this community, continue to get these book recommendations and share them with others. And as always, my name is Jonathan. This is Mr. Pearson Talks Books. We'll see you next time.